Chapter 11, Chaos. The next morning, as the first rays of dawn filtered softly through the window, Ran finally stirred and lazily opened her eyes. Gazing at the gauzy canopy overhead, she lay in a daze for a full 30 seconds before suddenly remembering where she was. Just then, the bed curtains parted, and Wu Yuding's beautiful face peeked in with a cheerful smile. Ranjia, time to get up. Otherwise, we might be late. Ran blinked at her, slightly dazed, as a strange thought crossed her mind. How wonderful it would be if I had Yuding's exquisite looks. To wake up and be greeted by such beauty, it was undeniably a lovely way to start the day. Her luckless boyfriend in her past life must have longed for just such a sight. A twinge of regret struck her. Why hadn't she asked that woman in white to change her appearance, too? But it was too late now. What kind of path would her life take this time around? She had no certainty at all. Ranjia, what's wrong? Wu Yuding asked curiously, noticing Ran still staring at her motionlessly. It's nothing, Ran replied, pulling herself from her thoughts. She avoided Yuding's probing gaze and stepped out of bed, picking up the pale green gown from the bedside and moving behind the folding screen to change. Yuding's voice continued to chatter on cheerfully. Ranjia, I've already prepared water for you to wash up. Once you're ready, we can go find Sister Sue and the others. Ran responded vaguely. Emerging from behind the screen, she moved to wash her face and brush her hair, when a sudden giggle broke the air. Ranjia, you put your clothes on wrong. Yuding pointed with a grin, barely holding back her laughter. Ran looked down at herself. Nothing seemed particularly amiss, except that the dress didn't look quite as elegant on her as it did on Yuding. Let me help you, Yuding offered as she walked over. With practiced hands, she untied Ran's sash and draped it over the screen, then carefully adjusted the dress's fastenings and smoothed the hem. Finally, she tied the sash again, finishing it with a neat bow at the waist. All done. Isn't that much better? She pushed Ran in front of the mirror. Reflected in the bronze mirror were two graceful figures, one radiant as a blooming flower, the other serene as an orchid. Ran's hair was still slightly tousled, lending her an air of softness and subtle allure. She stared at her reflection, surprised to see such a delicate, feminine side of herself. Usually reserved and composed, she rarely showed any overt emotion. To others, she had always seemed unreadable and distant. And now, draped in ancient attire, she appeared like a different person altogether. Was it her appearance that had changed, or something deeper within her heart? She let out a quiet sigh, a wave of sorrow rising in her chest. Everything had changed. Whether it was her body or her spirit, there was no going back. The sudden silence made Wu Yuding look up in confusion. She tugged gently on Ran's sleeve. Ranjia, are you okay? I'm fine. Ran gave her a rare, gentle smile. I'm going to wash up. She walked calmly over to the basin, bent slightly, and began washing her face. Her movements were unhurried and graceful, without a trace of the frantic rush that often came with a late start. Though Yuding felt anxious, she didn't dare interrupt. Only after a long while did Ran finish. As Wu Yuding stepped forward to speak, Ran reached out and took her hand. Let's go. Wu Yuding blinked, caught off guard, and allowed herself to be led out. It wasn't until they entered the main hall of the side courtyard and saw Su Mingsue and the others that she finally snapped out of it. Scratching her head, she thought to herself, why did Ranjia seem a little different just now? Yuding Mimi. Su Mingsue greeted her with a warm laugh, quickly stepping forward and taking her arm. At the same moment, Ran subtly let go of Yuding's hand. So, how was it? Everything okay? Were you too scared to sleep last night? Actually, I slept quite well, Yuding said, surprised herself. She usually struggled in unfamiliar places, yet last night she had slept soundly. Could it be because of Ranjia? Oh, slept well, did you? That's great. Su Mingsue's gaze shifted playfully to Ran. Looks like we owe it to your roommate. Su Mingsue bounced over and patted Ran on the shoulder. Thanks for looking after my dear sister. From now on, we're friends. I didn't do anything, Ran replied softly, deftly sidestepping Su Mingsue's hand. Sujia, Yuding gently tugged at Su Mingsue's sleeve, whispering, Ranjia doesn't like crowds. Don't be so loud. Got it. Su Mingsue grinned. She glanced around the room, frowning slightly. Where's Madame Zhang? Wasn't she supposed to meet with us ladies this morning? Ran kept her gaze lowered, unfazed by the rising noise around her. As time passed and Madame Zhang still didn't appear, the hushed whispers turned into a chorus of complaints. What's going on? Why isn't Madame Zhang here yet? Yeah, weren't we supposed to meet the mistresses today? This is so nerve-wracking, and now nothing's happening. Did they forget about us? Maybe we should go take a look? We can't just wander around. We'll get scolded. Then what? Are we supposed to just sit here and wait? We don't really have a choice. What if we get into trouble? After a brief round of arguing, the room quieted down. Someone had suggested going out to check, but Su Mingsue quickly stopped them. Ran watched with cool detachment, noticing that Su Mingsue handled the situation quite well. She had the charisma to calm people down even when they were growing restless. Clearly, her voice carried weight. But after another hour passed and still no one came, the crowd stirred again. How long are we supposed to wait? Did they really forget us? This is ridiculous. We can't just sit here forever. Let's go see what's happening. Agreed. I'm coming too. One by one, the girls rushed out. This time even Su Mingsue couldn't hold them back. She herself was anxious now. Yuding, let's go too. Okay. Yuding hesitated, then nodded. She turned to call Ran, only to find her calmly seated, sipping tea as if nothing were amiss. Ranjia, aren't you going with us? Nothing worth seeing, Ran said softly, taking another sip. Su Mingsue, already at the door, paused mid-step and turned back, eyeing her suspiciously. Wait, do you know something? I don't know anything, Ran replied evenly. Then why aren't you coming? All the other girls had already gone. Walking around is tiring. Su Mingsue rolled her eyes. You sure are calm, but aren't you the least bit curious? There's nothing to be curious about. Something must have happened in the estate, and for now, they have no time for us. Something happened? What happened? And how do you know? Su Mingsue was fully intrigued now. She walked over and sat beside Ran, leaning in close. You do know something. doing? Tell me. I don't know anything, Pianran repeated, unmoved. You're such a strange person, Suming-sui muttered, then grabbed Wu Yuding's hand. Fine, since she's not going, we'll go ourselves. Pianranjia, you're really not coming? Wu Yuding asked again, glancing back. Pianran only nodded slightly, so Yuding followed Suming-sui out the door. Left alone in the now empty hall, Pianran silently counted to herself. 20 minutes. It won't take more than 20 minutes. Last night, the Liu estate had been visited by a skilled thief. There was no way the household would let the matter rest. If the intruder had only stolen valuables, the punishment might have been lighter. But that thief's agility suggested far more than just theft. It seemed the girls were in for quite a bit of trouble. Chapter 12, Trouble. As expected, not long after the length of an incense stick had burned, a commotion rose outside the courtyard. The door was flung open with a loud bang, and 7 or 8 frightened servant girls were shoved inside by several burly guards of the Liu household. A few of the more timid ones were so terrified they collapsed to the ground and couldn't get up. Madame Zhang strode in, her face dark with fury, pointing at the girls sprawled on the floor. You unruly little things. Instead of staying put, you wandered about aimlessly and ruined the third Mrs. plans. Now, kneel, all of you, and wait for her to deal with you. With a sharp wave of her hand, the guards retreated and locked the door behind them. The girls' faces turned ashen. It was far too late for regrets now. Pianranjia, we were wrong. We shouldn't have ignored your warning. And now we've offended the third miss. What are we going to do? Wu Yuding sobbed, looking at Pianran as if she were a long-lost relative. If you'd known this would happen, why act so recklessly in the first place? Pianran, who had been silently observing from the corner, responded indifferently. Do you have to add insult to injury? Suming-sui snapped, glaring at her. But Pianran didn't even spare her a glance. Time crawled by under the heavy silence. It wasn't until nearly noon that the hall door creaked open again and Madame Zhang reappeared, her expression stern. You lot, come with me. The third miss wishes to see you. Fear clutched their hearts. No one dared move. Just as Suming-sui steeled herself to step forward, Pianran calmly walked past her. Please lead the way, Madame Zhang, she said evenly. Madame Zhang gave her a surprised look. This girl, though delicate and unremarkable in appearance, carried herself with remarkable composure. Was she truly unafraid? Even Madame Zhang, accustomed to dealing with all manner of powerful figures, felt a chill when facing the third miss. Surely this girl was just putting on a brave face? Very well. Follow me, and remember, when you stand before the third miss, mind your words. Even the gods won't save you if you speak out of turn. Her tone softened slightly, once again adopting her usual kindly effect. Ade. Yes, ma'am, the girls responded meekly, following her out of the side courtyard. They headed westward. As they passed Ling Lake, Pianran glanced at the small pavilion in the center and noticed it had shifted position slightly. Understanding dawned on her, though she said nothing. After passing through several halls, they arrived at a garden filled with blooming peach blossoms. Above the entrance hung a plaque bearing 3 characters, Luxiangju, Fragrance Retreat. This, clearly, was the third Mrs. residence. They were led into a spacious flower hall and instructed to wait with heads bowed. Madame Zhang left a few guards at the door and went inside to report their arrival. Before long, 2 maids in green robes emerged to lead the way. Following behind them was a woman in a rose-colored gauze dress. Her hair flowed down her back like a waterfall of midnight silk. Her skin was porcelain smooth, her face like a peach blossom in full bloom, her brows arched gracefully like distant mountains, and her lips were crimson and elegant. A true beauty, breathtaking in every sense. Yet she wore no lavish jewelry, only a white jade ornament hung at her slender waist, adorned with 8 treasures inlaid on a delicate pendant. Her hair was unadorned except for a single phoenix hairpin placed askew in her elegant bun. Wu Yuding was beautiful as well, but too delicate, lacking this woman's poise and commanding presence. Though their features might compare, the difference in bearing was worlds apart. Indeed, daughters of noble houses were far beyond the reach of ordinary girls. As the beautiful woman took her seat, Madame Zhang quickly reminded the stunned group, "This is the third miss. Why haven't you greeted her yet?" Startled back to reality, the girls immediately knelt in unison. The third miss raised a hand, her voice as melodious as a warbler's song. "You may rise. I imagine you all know why Madame Zhang brought you here," she said, casting a slow glance across the room. "Recently, our Liu household has suffered several thefts. At my father's instruction, we invited Master Qinshuan, a renowned expert in tracking, to investigate. We were on the verge of uncovering the culprits when your senseless wandering disrupted a crucial lead. Though the Liu family is wealthy and powerful, we do not abuse our status. Still, a household without order cannot thrive. Since you've entered our estate, you must abide by our rules. Your recklessness has now cost us vital clues, and Master Qinshuan's efforts have been wasted. Under ordinary circumstances, this might have been forgiven, but this matter concerns the reputation of our entire household. If we let it go, where is our dignity? The punishment may seem harsh, but it is necessary. I'm telling you this not to invite resentment, but to prevent any misunderstanding. Madame Zhang, carry out the Liu family's rules." Madame Zhang stepped forward and announced, "By the third Mrs. command, each of you is to receive 30 strokes of the rod. After the punishment, you will be sent home and will not be employed again." Crying erupted instantly throughout the hall. 30 strokes, for a sturdy male servant, perhaps bearable. But for these frail young girls, it was a severe sentence. Few, if any, would be able to stand afterward. Pianran's brows furrowed slightly. The third miss looked calm and composed, but her decisiveness was chilling. Clearly, the girl's transgression had not been minor. Why else would she act with such severity? Especially considering they hadn't even formally started their duties. Technically speaking, they weren't official Liu household maids yet. Wu Yuding, pale as a ghost, had collapsed into Su Mingsue's arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. The others looked equally despondent, glancing at one another in helpless silence before lowering their heads in despair. What's this? Is someone dissatisfied? The third Miss's eyes gleamed as she lifted her teacup and took a dainty sip. No, miss. Your judgment is absolutely fair. Who would dare question it? A green-robed maid behind her stepped forward with a sycophantic smile. But as she glanced at the girls below, her eyes betrayed open contempt and the faintest trace of smug satisfaction. Perhaps the others didn't notice, but Pianran caught it clearly. She recognized her immediately. This was the same yellow-clad maid who had once ordered her to take out the trash. Very well. Take them away, the third Miss said, lifting her hand slightly to dismiss them. Just then, a tremulous voice rose from below, so soft it was barely audible in the still hall. Third Miss, Pianrangia is innocent. Everyone gasped and turned toward the speaker. It was Wu Yuding. The same girl who had just been trembling and weak now knelt upright, her body still shaking, but no longer clinging to Su Mingsue. Yuding, Su Mingsue stared at her in astonishment. You've got a lot of nerve to speak so disrespectfully to the miss? The yellow-clad maid glared, her eyes burning with fury, as if she might leap forward and tear Wu Yuding apart. Frightened by her menacing glare, Yuding lowered her head and trembled violently, unsure where she had found the courage to speak up in the first place. Shuiying, stand down, the third Miss said calmly. She rose from her seat and walked slowly toward Wu Yuding. Who did you just say was innocent? Chapter 13, an unexpected turn. Wu Yuding opened and closed her mouth several times, but not a single word escaped. Beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Su Mingsue, having recovered from her shock, was fuming inwardly. What's gotten into this girl? At first, she thought Yuding had grown bold, but now she saw it was just an impulsive act of defiance. What was so special about that Pianran to make Yuding defend her like this? She stole a glance toward the corner where Pianran stood, only to see that same unchanging, calm expression on her face. Anger flared in Su Mingsue's chest. Without thinking, she rushed forward, stood protectively before Wu Yuding, and called out loudly, "Third Miss, Yuding is innocent. I dragged her out with me. If punishment must be given, then punish me." Oh, and what is your name? The third Miss asked, glancing at her. I am Su Mingsue, your grace. Su Mingsue? The third Miss's eyes narrowed slightly. Strange. I thought I heard a different name just now. She then turned back to Wu Yuding. And you? What is your name? Raise your head. But Yuding, her courage drained, trembled where she knelt, unable to lift her head or utter a single word. You insolent girl. The Miss is speaking to you. Madame Zhang quickly stepped forward to scold her, then turned to the third Miss with a conciliatory smile. Third Miss, this one is named Wu Yuding. She's newly arrived at the manor and hasn't yet learned the rules. Please don't hold it against her. The third Miss gently lifted Wu Yuding's chin with a finger. At the sight of her delicate features, something flickered in her eyes, then quickly vanished. She's quite pretty, she said with a faint smile. But alas, far too timid. Such a nature is unfit for service. Third Miss, Yuding is physically frail. I fear she wouldn't survive the 30 lashes. I beg your grace to show mercy, Su Mingsue quickly added, sensing a trace of sympathy in her tone. I would like to be merciful, the third Miss said, returning to her seat, but if I pardon her, how will I explain myself to others? Su Mingsue bit her lip, then dropped to her knees beside Yuding. Then I will take the 30 strokes in her place. Wu Yuding turned to her with wide eyes, shaking her head furiously. Tears poured down her cheeks, soaking her sleeves. 60 strokes, the third Miss raised a delicate brow, a curious gleam in her eyes. Do you think you can handle that? I'm strong enough to endure it, Su Mingsue replied firmly. The third Miss studied her for a moment, then unexpectedly burst into laughter. Her smile was radiant, brightening her entire face. Bold and brave, she praised. Then, the smile vanished. Under other circumstances, I might have granted your request, but not this time. Third Miss, that's enough. My decision is final. Step down. She waved her hand, silencing Su Mingsue. One glance to Madame Zhang was enough. Zhang immediately signaled for the guards, who came forward to escort the girls away. Panic filled Su Mingsue's eyes. She didn't know about the others, but Wu Yuding surely wouldn't survive the 30 lashes. How can she still be worried about someone else? Her gaze drifted toward that someone else, who remained aloof and indifferent. Anger clenched her jaw until her teeth ground audibly. Of course Pianran noticed Su Mingsue's glare, but she was still hesitating. Should she really step into this mess? She hadn't expected Wu Yuding to speak up for her. Was she surprised? Certainly. Touched? Perhaps not. After all, she hadn't asked her to do it. Yet now that Yuding had taken a stand, Pianran felt as if she owed her something. She hated owing people. Third Miss, please wait. A soft but unwavering voice echoed through the hall. It wasn't loud, yet for some reason, everyone felt a jolt in their hearts. The third Miss paused, halfway to the inner chamber. She turned and saw a delicate, composed young woman step forward from the crowd. So, you've finally decided to speak, she said with a faint smile. You must be the innocent one Wu Yuding spoke of? Pianran's eyes glinted slightly. The third Miss is indeed as clever as they say. It's a pity your wisdom is unmatched by your mercy. How dare you speak to the Miss like that? Shuiying, the maid in yellow, jumped out again, her voice sharp with outrage. Pianran glanced at her coolly. I believe you're the one being rude. The Miss hasn't spoken, and yet you presume to chastise others on her behalf. Are you placing yourself on equal footing with your mistress? That, my dear sister, is insubordination. You mustn't listen to her, Miss. Shuiying's face paled, and she quickly turned to explain. I didn't mean it like that. Enough, Shuiying. Stand down, said the third Miss. Shuiying glared daggers at Pianran but said no more, stepping aside. The third Miss looked at Pianran again. You said nothing earlier when others pleaded on your behalf. What are you here for now? Nothing much. I only wish to ask the third miss to pardon the others. That drew stunned looks from all around, some surprised, others skeptical or outright disdainful. Pardon them all? The request was absurd. Even Su Mingsue's kneeling plea for Wu Yuding alone had moved the third miss not a bit. And this girl dared ask for everyone? The third miss smiled faintly. Did you not hear what I said just now? My decision is made. It will not change. But what if I can help you find the thieves' trail? Pian Ran replied evenly. The third miss, who had been about to turn away, froze mid-step. Her expression shifted, surprise flickering through her eyes. Slowly, she turned to face Pian Ran, her voice now serious. Do you understand the weight of what you just said? That is not something one should claim lightly. I do, Pian Ran replied, still calm. And I'm prepared to face the consequences. The third miss studied her carefully. There's nothing special about this girl, she thought. No striking features. No powerful aura, just that ever-present calm on her face. She could vanish into a crowd and no one would notice. Is the third miss having doubts? Pian Ran said. Very well. If I fail to uncover the thief's trail, then for the 30 lashes each of the 10 girls here, I shall take all 300 in their stead. Gasps filled the room. Shock and disbelief echoed in every corner, from Madame Zhang, the guards, the other maids, even the third miss herself looked visibly shaken. Are you mad? You'll die. Su Mingxue rushed to her side and grabbed her arm. She might not have liked Pian Ran much, but watching her walk toward death without lifting a hand? That she couldn't do. Pian Ran looked at Su Mingxue, slightly puzzled. Didn't she hate me just moments ago? Why is she suddenly so concerned? What is your name? The third miss asked at last, for the first time truly acknowledging the calm young woman before her. Pian Ran. Chapter 14, Stepping Forward. Pian Ran? You know the art of tracking? The third miss eyed her with suspicion. I don't. Then why speak so boldly? Now the third miss felt more like she was being toyed with. Was this girl simply trying to stand out? Not knowing tracking techniques doesn't mean one can't find the trail, Pian Ran replied calmly. If the third miss remains doubtful, I suggest we put it in writing. She knew well that words alone would be dismissed as boastful nonsense. You want to put it in writing? The third miss was momentarily stunned. A second ago, she thought the girl was joking. Now it seemed she was serious. Should I trust her, or not? Third miss, I ask that you decide quickly. I don't enjoy wasting time on trivial matters, Pian Ran said, her gaze lifting to meet hers with quiet resolve. The third miss stared at the girl in front of her, suddenly realizing, for the first time in her life, she might have misjudged someone. Very well, she said, her voice resolute. Let it be put in writing. I just hope you don't regret it. I never do anything I'll regret. Pian Ran's voice was firm. Good. Let's see what you're capable of, then. With a wave of her hand, the third miss ordered, someone, bring writing materials. Snowing immediately went to the study and returned with ink, brush, paper, and inkstone, placing them on the desk. Pian Ran stepped forward, dipped the brush into the ink, but did not write immediately. Instead, she cast a glance at Snowing, who wore a mocking sneer, then turned to the third miss and said, I have one condition. A condition? The third miss's interest peaked. Yes. If I succeed in helping you find the thief, I ask that you allow all these girls to remain in the Lu household, and grant each of them a reward of 50 taels of silver. Pfft. Snowing burst into a contemptuous laugh. Are you daydreaming? You're just a bunch of worthless maids awaiting punishment, and now you dare ask for rewards? Indeed. Lowly maids have no right to make demands. The decision lies with the third miss, Pian Ran responded smoothly, not even lifting an eyebrow. Good. At least you know your place, Snowing sneered. But then she noticed something strange. Many of the maids, especially Su Mingxue, were holding back laughter. What was going on? The answer came quickly as the third miss fixed Snowing with a frosty stare. You. Snowing stammered, flustered. Snowing! Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? The third miss scolded sharply. Miss! Snowing, flustered and indignant, tried to defend herself, but the third miss cut her off. Leave. Now. Snowing left with a face as long as morning paper. Disgraceful, the third miss thought. I once kept her close for her cleverness and charm, but she clearly lacks the sense to act when it matters. Such a fool has no place at my side. Turning back to Pian Ran, she curved her lips into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You do know, don't you, that making conditions with me comes at a cost? Please, speak plainly, Pian Ran replied, her brow twitching almost imperceptibly. I'll agree to your terms, but if you succeed, you must become my personal maid. Gasps of envy rippled through the crowd, all eyes falling on Pian Ran, but she showed no sign of joy. 10 days. Pian Ran gave her answer without hesitation. That was her limit. You really are different from the rest, the third miss murmured in surprise. Anyone else would be overjoyed at such a reward, but not her. Maybe I didn't misjudge her after all. Then it's settled. Pian Ran picked up the brush and swiftly penned the agreement before handing it to the third miss. Lu Yueyin gave the document a cursory glance, then did a double take. This handwriting is horrendous. It doesn't suit her at all. Did she just learn to write yesterday? Finished reading? Let's get going, Pian Ran said, urging her on. Madame Zhang, take these girls back to the side courtyard. I'll deal with them once this matter is resolved, the third miss ordered. Yes, third miss. As Madame Zhang led them away, Su Mingxue kept glancing back, her nerves taut. That cold, indifferent girl, does she really know what she's doing? If this is all just an act, we're doomed. If I survive this, I swear I'll give her a proper beating first. Never again will I act on impulse. You're called Pian Ran? Lu Yueyin asked again as they walked along a corridor in the Lu estate. Pian Ran nodded, then suddenly crouched by a flower bed, carefully searching the ground. At last, beneath a dense thicket, she found what she was looking for. Where are you from? Yueyin asked, certain that Pian Ran wasn't native to Qianma City. Her accent and appearance were quite different. From elsewhere. No kidding, Yueyin muttered inwardly. That's just avoiding the question. She was about to probe further when she saw Pian Ran examining a single leaf, flipping it over several times. Curious, she asked, what's special about that leaf? Pian Ran handed handed it to her casually. Where is the kitchen in this estate? Yuan paused, then pointed southeast. That way. Why? Are you hungry? I can have someone. Let's go there. Pianran interrupted, already heading off. Lu Yuan blinked, taken aback by the sudden authority in her tone. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. In the Lu household, she was the most beloved daughter, pampered like a jewel. Even in the city lord's manor, she was treated with honor and deference. But now, faced with this mysterious, unreadable girl, she felt like the one being led. It was not a pleasant sensation. Still, if solving this matter could strengthen their ties with the city lord's household, she would swallow her pride, for now. At the Lu residence kitchen, servants were bustling about preparing lunch. When they saw the third miss approaching with a strange girl, they immediately bowed. Lu Yuan waved a hand. You may all step out. Miss Pianran is helping me investigate a matter, and too many people would only create disorder. Yes, third miss. They began to withdraw, but Pianran spoke up. No need to leave. Just stay where you are. The servants froze, exchanging confused glances. Lu Yuan's brow twitched in annoyance. This girl really is taking liberties, she thought. I call her Miss Pianran once, and she's already acting like she owns the place, but now is not the time to argue. She forced a smile. She's working on my behalf. Do as she says. Yes, third miss. The servants all stopped their tasks and stood still. Pianran walked slowly through their ranks, back and forth, examining each face. After 2 rounds, she stopped in front of a dark-skinned maid dressed in coarse cloth. Where were you last night? Pianran asked her directly. Ha? The girl looked stunned, speechless. She's important. Pianran turned to Yuan. You might want someone to question her. Without waiting for a response, she strode out of the kitchen and headed in a different direction. Lu Yuan signaled her attendants and hurried after her. Chapter 15, The Search, Pianran. What exactly do you mean? Isn't it obvious, third miss? That maid had contact with the thief, Pianran said calmly. How did you discover that? From a leaf I picked up beside the corridor. A leaf? What's special about it? It came from the tree outside the kitchen. Lu Yuan was completely puzzled. How can you be so sure? The trees around the estate are mostly the same. How do you know that particular leaf is from the kitchen tree? It carried the scent of the kitchen. The scent of the kitchen. That sounded impossible. The kitchen was one of the busiest places in the estate, with countless people coming and going. Even Master Qianshuan had spent a long time investigating and still couldn't discern anything unusual there. How could she detect something so subtle? That dark-skinned maid met someone under that tree. The scent clung to her. And how do you know the person she met was the thief? Because that leaf also carried a trace of an unfamiliar scent, one that doesn't belong to anyone in the Lu household. More importantly, that unfamiliar aura matched the one Pianran had encountered the night before, but that wasn't something she could reveal to Lu Yuan. You've only just arrived at the Lu estate. How could you know the scent of everyone here? Lu Yuan couldn't help but question her. Which is why further confirmation is needed, Pianran said as they reached a locked red lacquered gate, the ancestral hall of the Lu family. May I have it opened? Lu Yuan glanced at her, then waved a hand. A servant stepped forward to unlock the heavy door, which creaked open to reveal a tidy courtyard surrounded by covered corridors. Pianran strode in and headed straight for the main hall. As she pushed open the door, a wave of fruit-sweet incense and candle smoke greeted her. She paused briefly, savoring the faint fragrances in the air. Lu Yuan stood quietly nearby, her expression solemn. Along the way, she had gradually come to realize that Pianran was no ordinary girl. But if she truly had such skill, why had she never heard of her before in all of Qianma City? Third miss, Pianran suddenly asked. The item that was stolen, it wasn't an ordinary object, was it? Lu Yuan looked at her and nodded. That's correct. You said the thief returned several times. I take it he hasn't succeeded in getting what he came for, and yet, the Lu family has lost something valuable. Has it never occurred to you, Pianran said slowly, that the stolen item might still be in the estate? If the thief hadn't given up, it was likely because there was something he still hadn't taken away. Her words struck like lightning. Lu Yuan's eyes widened. She had always assumed the repeated break-ins were provocations, now it seemed she was completely mistaken. Are you saying, the item we lost might still be within the Lu estate? Her voice trembled with excitement. Possibly, Pianran's tone was calm. After standing still for a moment, she walked to the offering table and picked up a lotus-glazed teapot. She handed it to Lu Yuan. Was this teapot always here? No, but how do you know that? Lu Yuan was surprised yet again. How could she notice such a subtle change? And the original teapot, where is it? Gone, yes. After the break-in 2 nights ago, my father smashed it in a fit of anger. I told Snowing to throw it away. Snowing? Pianran frowned slightly. She suddenly recalled bumping into Snowing yesterday morning. A thought flashed through her mind. Could that dull, dusty bead she had picked up actually be the Lu family's missing treasure? Is there really still hope of retrieving the lost item? Lu Yuan asked. That was what mattered most to her. That's not for me to answer, Pianran said coolly. My job is to find the thief's trail. Whether you can recover the treasure depends on your own ability. With that, she turned and walked out of the ancestral hall. Wait! Lu Yuan chased after her. What do you mean by that? You'll understand once you question that dark-skinned maid. After lunch, Lu Yuan summoned the kitchen steward, Grannywan, to interrogate the maid. Only then did the truth come to light. The foolish girl had been tricked into sneaking into the ancestral hall to steal. Had it not been for Pianran discovering the issue with the teapot, they would still be in the dark. Suddenly, a thought struck Lu Yuan, and she jumped to her feet. Of course, the thief must have hidden the Lu family's treasure inside the teapot, intending to retrieve it later. But the teapot had been smashed and discarded. So, had the treasure been thrown out along with it? She shouted urgently. Someone, bring Snowing to me at once. The maidservants, startled by her panic, ran off in haste. Moments later, Snowing entered the room, her face pale and drawn. Before Lu Yuan could even speak, she dropped to her knees. Miss, I was wrong. Please don't send me away. She had already been told she was no longer permitted to serve the third miss. Snowing, where did you throw that teapot I told you to get rid of 2 nights ago? Snowing froze, remembering that she had carelessly given the task to someone else. She couldn't admit the truth now, not with her fate hanging in the balance. So she mumbled, I threw it onto to the junk pile. Which courtyard's junk pile? Take people there now. Search thoroughly. If you don't find it, don't bother coming back. Lu Yuan's face was grim. Yes, miss. I'll go right away. Trembling, Snowing hurried off. After an entire afternoon of frantic searching, the broken pieces of the teapot were finally found. Snowing brought them to Lu Yuan, her hands bloodied from the shards. But Lu Yuan didn't even glance at her. Instead, she sifted through the fragments herself, yet found nothing. Her expression darkened further. How can this be? Where is it? According to Pian Ran, the treasure had to be hidden in the old teapot. So why wasn't it there? Could someone else have found it already? She thought for a moment, then ordered, "Bring Pian Ran to me, miss." Snowing looked up pitifully, only to be met with cold indifference. Snowing, do you admit your guilt? Lu Yuan asked icily. I do. Please have mercy, miss. Don't send me away. I won't drive you out of the estate, Lu Yuan said. But you're no longer fit to serve by my side. From now on, you'll work in the laundry room as a lower servant, miss. Tears streamed down Snowing's face. Leave. Lu Yuan had already lost her patience. Snowing could only sob as she left. She waited, tapping her forehead in frustration. The sooner this matter was resolved, the sooner she could relax. It had already dragged on for half a month. Her father had entrusted this case to her not only to recover the treasure, but also as a stepping stone to gain favor with the city lord's family. Everything had been perfectly arranged, until things took an unexpected turn. If this failed, the Lu family would lose both the treasure and their opportunity. Just then, a servant announced from outside, "Third miss, Missy has arrived." "Let her in," she said, straightening up. The door opened, and Pian Ran strolled in unhurriedly. "What took you so long?" Lu Yuan asked, her tone laced with annoyance. "I had a heavy lunch, so I took a walk," Pian Ran replied with a careless shrug. "The Lu family's treasure hasn't been found." "Has it already fallen into the thief's hands?" "Unlikely," Pian Ran said. "If the thief knew the teapot was broken, he wouldn't have returned last night to look for it. Then what should we do now?" Lu Yuan asked anxiously. "Wait. If he didn't get what he wanted, he'll definitely come back. Are you sure? Last night's commotion was loud. He might not dare return. Everyone knows that after stirring the grass, the snake runs. He will come," Pian Ran said firmly. Then she added, "But whether you can catch him, that depends on you. Third miss, tonight, I'll arrange 3 layers of guards across the estate. If he dares come again, he'll never escape," Lu Yuan said with confidence. Then, still uneasy, she asked again, "You're certain he'll come?" "I'm certain." Pian Ran's calm, composed expression left Lu Yuan deeply puzzled. Where does she get such confidence? From the moment she began uncovering clues, Lu Yuan had felt a growing sense of disbelief. Who exactly is this Pian Ran? Why has no one ever heard of her? Even the famed Master Qinxuan was bested by her. How could she see flaws that everyone else missed? Still, Lu Yuan wasn't a fool. Talents like this didn't come by often. She only had 10 days, but she was confident she could change Pian Ran's mind within that time. A person like her must not be allowed to leave. Chapter 16, The Gift of the Pill. That night, the moonlight was hazy. Under the shroud of darkness, the Lu Manor revealed only a faint outline. The connected buildings lay silent and still, like a beast lying in wait, ready to pounce. Suddenly, a shadow flickered by, landing soundlessly on the rooftop. But before he could make a move, a heavy, commanding presence struck him with a jolt. He whipped around, startled, only to find a slender figure standing not far behind. The wind swept through her long hair and flowing robes, making her seem like a celestial being descended from the heavens. "Persistent, aren't you?" Pian Ran looked at the masked man in black and spoke with calm indifference. "This has nothing to do with you. You'd best stay out of it," the man replied, his voice hoarse, clearly disguised. "Oh," she said. "Unfortunately, you're too late for that. If you leave now, I won't make things difficult for you," the man said again, a note of restraint in his tone that was oddly out of place. "Can the words of a thief be trusted? I am a man of the Dao sect. I do not speak falsehoods," he said, clenching his fists at his sides. "The Dao sect? So that's where you're from?" Pian Ran raised an eyebrow. "You don't seem surprised," the man noted, puzzled by her unchanging expression. "Why should I be?" she said casually. "A thief from the Dao sect. What are you trying to prove? That even thieves have principles?" The masked man fell silent, stunned. She had pierced the very core of his beliefs in a single sentence, leaving him speechless. "You can't beat me. Best stand aside," he finally said after a long pause. "Did I say I was going to stop you?" Pian Ran replied with a faint smile. "Then why are you?" He hesitated, confusion creeping into his voice. "Lu Manor is heavily guarded tonight. The 5 elements and 8 trigrams have all been rearranged. If you go down now, you may not come back up." The man stiffened, surprised. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Aren't you a maid of the Lu household? Even if I doubt your identity, I didn't think you'd help me. Your martial skills are impressive," Pian Ran said, "but that formation isn't something you can break with brute force alone." "Thank you for the warning," he said solemnly. "But even if this manor is a net of heaven and earth, I must go." "So determined?" Pian Ran slowly took out the dull gray pearl from her sleeve and said lightly, "I didn't think this little thing would be so irresistible." "You?" The man froze mid-step, his gaze locked on the pearl in her hand, disbelief flashing in his eyes. How is that in your possession?" he demanded. "Oh, I came across it by chance," Pian Ran replied with a shrug. The man's eyes flickered with hesitation. After a moment, he stared at her and said grimly, "Since it's with you, then I have no choice but to offend you." He lunged forward, hand outstretched. "You've already offended me enough," Pian Ran said coolly, watching his palm grow larger in her vision, then calmly whispered, "Lian Tian." His hand stopped just an inch from her face. Her lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "You?" The man was utterly shocked. "Surprised? How do you know my name?" His voice was no longer disguised, it was clear and youthful. "Still want to fight me?" Pian Ran lifted the pearl and held it in front of him. "I must have that chi and golden pill," he said. After a pause, he sighed and pulled off his black mask, revealing a face as luminous as the moon itself. Though his words brimmed with intent, he made no move to attack. "Oh, you're really that determined?" Pian Pian Ran toyed with the pearl for a moment, then suddenly tossed it at him. Then take it. Lien Tian caught it instinctively, staring at the dull gray orb in his palm in disbelief. You're giving it to me? I already have, she said lightly. Do you even know what this is? No idea, she replied, though in truth, she had her suspicions. It had to be the Lu family's missing treasure. His reaction all but confirmed it. You'd give it away without even knowing what it is? Aren't you afraid you'll regret it? I never do things I'll regret. But, are you done? She frowned. If you don't want it, I'll just toss it. Toss it? Cold sweat broke across Lien Tian's brow. Do you think this is garbage? If you're done talking, sit down. I'll teach you how to bypass the 8 trigrams formation. Lien Tian was stunned. I mean, I don't think that's necessary anymore. Who said that? You're still going in. Why would I? To put on a show, she said. A show? His thoughts couldn't keep up. We're going to act for the 3rd young miss. Otherwise, how am I going to earn my 50 taels of silver? 50 taels? He looked at her like she was mad. It's our agreement. If I help her find clues about the theft, she pays me, Pian Ran explained. What? Are you a fool? That treasure is worth more than 5,000 taels. 50 taels is a joke. What would I do with that much silver? Wait for it to sprout and bear fruit? I give up. You're awfully sure I'll go along with your plan, he muttered as he crouched beside her. If you don't, you won't be able to leave with that pill, she said simply. Lien Tian didn't quite believe her until a single incense stick's time passed, and he realized she wasn't exaggerating at all. The Lu Manor's 8 trigrams formation was indeed intricate, but with Pian Ran's explanation, he had grasped the essentials. Since he wasn't truly risking his life, it all felt much easier. He looked at her and suddenly smiled. The Lu family would never guess that you, of all people, would team up with a thief to dismantle their great formation. Don't get cocky. The formation changes constantly. If you get careless, you'll fall flat. I'll be careful. Then, after a pause, he asked, why are you helping me? I'm helping myself. In other words, don't flatter yourself. Lien Tian didn't mind. Then I'll go now. Pian Ran nodded. He stood up and took 2 steps before suddenly hesitating. Here. If you really need money, take this, he said, untying a pouch from his waist and handing it to her. She stared at him in silence. When his hand began to twitch nervously, she suddenly raised her foot and kicked him off the roof. Ah! Lien Tian yelped as he fell, a wry smile forming on his face. This woman. So annoying, Pian Ran muttered, standing atop the roof and watching his silhouette disappear into the night. Moments later, lights flared up all across the manor. His scream had clearly alerted the guards. With a sweep of her sleeve, Pian Ran leapt down from the rooftop and quietly returned to her room. Now, it was up to Lien Tian. If he wasn't too much of an idiot, he'd escape. And if he succeeded, she could leave Lu Manor without any regrets. Chapter 17. The governor's daughter. Early the next morning, Pian Ran was still lost in dreams when she was suddenly and violently shaken awake. As she groggily opened her eyes, she was greeted by Su Mingsue's wide, anxious face looming far too close. Pian Ran. Still sleeping? Do you have any idea what's happened? Pian Ran pushed her face away with one hand and sat up slowly, beginning to dress without the slightest urgency. And what? She asked calmly. Does it have to do with me? How could it not have something to do with you? The governor's daughter, Miss Sun, is here at Lu Manor. She's asked to see you specifically. The governor's residence? Pian Ran's hand paused as she tied her sash. Her brows furrowed. Why would she want to see me? Obviously because you helped the 3rd young miss solve the case of the theft. She's here to reward you personally. Wu Yuding, who had been standing nearby, smiled sweetly. Pian Ranjia, you don't even know. You're famous in Lu Manor now. Not only are all us new maids grateful to you for protecting us, even the older servants show you extra respect. Instead of delight, Pian Ran's frown deepened. Did the 3rd young miss catch the thief last night? No. Su Mingsue shook her head, but the Lu family's stolen treasure was returned intact. So she was overjoyed and immediately sent word to the governor's residence. That's why Miss Sun came personally. Why involve the governor's residence over a Lu family matter? Pian Ran asked as she made her way to the copper basin to wash. Oh, come on. You don't know? I heard the 3rd young miss is one of the leading candidates to marry into the governor's family. The Lu family has no sons, so their treasures might just become part of her dowry. You think the governor's residence wouldn't care? The treasure's been returned intact? So that idiot Lien Tian really gave the qi and golden pill back? Has he lost his mind? Something wasn't adding up. This felt wrong. And she couldn't make sense of it. Pian Ran, can't you be a little more excited? Su Mingsue gave her a dramatic eye roll. Important people were waiting for her in the main hall, yet she didn't even look the slightest bit thrilled. They're the ones eager to see me. I never said I wanted to see them. What? This is the governor's daughter we're talking about. Do you have any idea what kind of honor that is? How can you be so indifferent? Su Mingsue gave Wu Yuding a look, and together they took their positions on either side of Pian Ran, forcing her to sit as they started helping her wash and dress. Half an hour later, a stunning young beauty emerged. Indeed, as the saying goes, clothes make the woman. But as Pian Ran looked at herself in the mirror, she felt entirely out of place. Her lips were too red, her face too pale, her crescent-shaped brows too delicately drawn. Was this really her? Without hesitation, she grabbed a damp towel and wiped the makeup clean. Ah, don't wipe it off. No, Su Mingsue wailed in despair. All her hard work was ruined in seconds. Pian Ran then began removing the elaborate hairpins and ornaments from her bun, leaving only the plain hair knot behind. Just as she was about to undo even that, Zhang Sa's voice called from outside the door. Miss Pian Ran, are you ready? The 3rd young miss sent me to fetch you. Su Mingsue and Wu Yuding panicked at once. They'd been specifically ordered to dress Pian Ran, and now look at her. How are they going to explain this? Zhang Sa pushed open the door, freezing the moment she saw Pian Ran's bare face. You're not ready yet? Miss Sun and the 3rd young miss have been waiting quite a while. Her accusatory gaze landed on Su and Wu, their cheeks flushing red. Just as they were about to explain, Pian Ran spoke flatly. I'm ready. Zhang Sa, please lead the way. But Zhang Sa looked at her plain hair and undecorated appearance, about to protest. If you're not worried about keeping your esteemed guests waiting, then by all means, stay here and chat. I'm in no hurry. hurry, Pianran replied coldly. Ha, she's not in a hurry? The third miss had been getting restless with every passing minute. And yet, this was just a maid. Why was she receiving such special treatment? Solving a theft and suddenly becoming a person of influence, life was full of strange turns. Zhang Sa forced a smile. You must be joking, miss. Let's be on our way. Seeing that she no longer pressed the issue, Pianran walked out the door ahead of her. Along the way, maids and servants stood at a respectful distance, casting furtive glances. Just as Su Mingsui said, there was admiration mixed with jealousy in their eyes. She had truly become a figure of renown in the Liu household. But Pianran felt nothing but discomfort. She only wished she could leave as soon as possible. In her past life, she had hated being the center of attention more than anything. That's why, after learning her ex-boyfriend's true identity, her affection for him vanished instantly. If not for his persistent persuasion, she might have broken up with him then and there. In hindsight, she should have. If she had, she wouldn't have witnessed his betrayal firsthand. Her nature was one meant for shadows. His brilliance had been too dazzling, it had burned her. Pianranjia, what are you thinking about? Wu Yuding, walking beside her, couldn't help asking when she noticed her long silence. Nothing, Pianran replied. Just some memories. Unpleasant ones, she silently added. Oh, Wu Yuding answered meekly, falling quiet. Su Mingsui, however, was still full of curiosity. Memories? From your childhood? Oh, I really can't imagine what you were like as a kid. You couldn't have been as cold and smileless as you are now, right? Childhood? Pianran's expression remained calm, but her thoughts drifted far away, to the years before she turned 10. To the welfare home where she lived with Yun Kai. Yun Kai, her ex-boyfriend. Back then, they were childhood sweethearts, inseparable, each the other's only solace. But then, he was adopted by a wealthy family, catapulted into a world she could never reach. From that moment on, they were worlds apart. If she had known how things would end, she would have preferred never to have met him. Better that than the agony of betrayal that had come later. The past was like smoke, and she had no wish to remember it. So why, in this ordinary moment, did those memories suddenly rise again, unbidden? Miss Pianran? Miss Pianran? Zhang Sa's voice jolted her from her thoughts. Yes, she replied distantly. We've arrived at Liuxiang residence. Allow me to announce your arrival. Pianran nodded and once again fell silent. Wu Yuding glanced at Pianran's faraway look, too nervous to say a word. She clutched her handkerchief tightly, while Su Mingsui, for once, didn't dare make a sound either. Whether it was her imagination or not, this silent version of Pianran made her feel uneasy. Chapter 18, The Qi and Golden Pill. Zhang Sa soon returned, smiling as she said, The third miss invites you in, miss. Pianran gave a slight nod, leaving Su and Wu behind as she stepped into the hall alone. The moment she entered, a rich floral fragrance greeted her. Glancing around at the newly arranged decorations, she thought to herself, clearly, the third miss had put effort into welcoming this future sister-in-law. Pianran greets the young ladies. Without lifting her eyes, she offered a formal curtsy. Whoever was seated above mattered little to her. All she wanted was to get through this dull meeting quickly and enjoy a moment of peace. Sister, it's you? A surprised exclamation rang out, and a blur of red flashed in front of her. Looking up, Pianran was unsurprised to see a somewhat familiar face. It was that clingy little girl from the inn who had laughed at her. Unlucky indeed. Why couldn't she shake her off? Ming'er, do you know Pianran? Liu Ying also walked over, a touch of surprise in her voice. The girl in red nodded, laughing sweetly. Of course I do. We've known each other for a while. But this sister here is so stubborn, no matter what I said, she refused to come with me to the governor's residence. So this is where she's been hiding? Is this tiny temple really better than the governor's mansion? Pianran glanced at them both with her usual calm, immediately noticing the faint shadow that crossed Liu Ying's face at the words tiny temple. Ming'er, you're joking again. I'm sure Pianran only refused because you scared her off. Liu Ying smiled, her tone light. I heard from Wuhan that no one can resist your clinginess. Injia, the red-clad girl blushed, stamping her foot in protest. You've been corrupted by my brother. Now you're teasing me too? How would I dare tease you? If you get so much as a scratch, your brother might come after me for answers. Liu Ying covered her mouth and laughed, obviously close with the girl. My brother dotes on you more than anyone. I probably don't even hold a candle to your place in his heart. The girl pouted. What nonsense are you spouting, child? A faint blush rose to Liu Ying's cheeks as she chided her. That phrase must have come straight from your brother too, huh? The girl sighed dramatically. I'm already 16, I'm not a child anymore. If the young ladies wish to continue reminiscing, Pianran said coolly from the side, her eyes drifting up to the ceiling beams, then perhaps I should take my leave. Wait, Pianranjia, you can't leave. The red-clad girl suddenly grabbed her sleeve. Do you know how long I've been looking for you? If I'd known you were with Injia, I would have dragged you to the governor's mansion myself. Oh dear, we got carried away chatting and I forgot to introduce you properly. Liu Ying pulled the red-clad girl to her side, smiling at Pianran. This is Miss Sun Mengmeng, the younger sister of our city governor, Sun Wuhan. Miss Sun, Pianran replied with a neutral expression. May I ask what business prompted this summons? I came to thank you, of course. Thanks to you, the Liu family's qi and golden pill was preserved. Liu Ying's expression shifted ever so slightly. Did this girl really just speak so casually of the Liu family's most prized treasure? Still, given the circumstances, there was nothing she could say. Qi and golden pill? Pianran didn't seem very interested. She replied with apparent indifference. Strange that I went through so much trouble and still don't know exactly what I was protecting. You probably don't know, Mengmeng said, eyes sparkling. The qi and golden pill is one of the 8 great treasures of the martial world. Its effects are incredible. It can help cultivators break through bottlenecks. It's something many dream of having. Oh, that does sound special. What a pity I never got to see it. That's easy. Just ask Jia to show it to you, Meng said brightly. The Qi and golden pill is a Lu family heirloom. It's not something to show at whim, Lu Yuan said, her tone slightly scolding. Don't be so stingy, Jia. I want to see it too. Are you saying you won't even let me have a peek? Please? Just one little look. This. Lu Yuan hesitated, glancing between Meng and Pian Ran, clearly torn. I understand, third miss, Pian Ran said lightly. This treasure was only just recovered. Naturally, you'd be reluctant to expose it. But please don't assume I covet it simply because I asked. If I were that kind of person, I wouldn't have helped you investigate in the first place. She's right, Jia. Pian Ranjia isn't that kind of person. Besides, it's not like that pill does anything for normal people anyway, Meng chimed in, backing her up. Fine. I'll show it to you. You two, come with me to the inner chamber. With a sigh of resignation, Lu Yuan led them deeper inside. The private suite contained 3 sections, a small tea pavilion, a study, and Lu Yuan's bedroom. She left them in the pavilion and disappeared into the bedroom. After a short while, she returned holding a gold-lacquered wooden box. This is the Qi and golden pill. She placed the box on the table and opened the lid. Inside lay a single golden yellow pill, gleaming faintly. Wow, that's the Qi and golden pill? Meng leaned in, her eyes wide with curiosity, inspecting it from every angle. Pian Ran stepped closer as well, but after one glance at the pill, she lost interest and looked away. Now that the treasure has been returned to its rightful owner, she said quietly, you should put it away. She's right, Jia. You'd better keep it safe. Who knows when it might come in handy again. Meng winked at Lu Yuan meaningfully. A faint blush colored Lu Yuan's cheeks. She hurriedly closed the box. Nonsense. You two wait outside. I'll put it away. Okay. Meng waved her hand breezily and turned to tug Pian Ran out with her. Pian Ran frowned as her hand was grabbed. She had always disliked physical contact, even with women. Without hesitation, she pulled her hand free. You're so cold, sister. Meng pouted. And you still haven't answered me. Is Lu Manor really that great? Why stay here instead of coming to the governor's mansion? I'd like to leave Lu Manor too, Pian Ran said honestly. But I don't have a choice. Really? That's great then. Why don't you come back with me to the governor's residence right now? I've been wanting to introduce you to my brother. I can't leave just yet. Why not? You're just a maid here. It's not like you've sold yourself. Who would dare stop you if you decided to go? No one's stopping me. I just said, I can't leave yet. Then when can you leave? And where will you go? Are you seriously saying being a servant here is better than being a guest at the governor's mansion? Meng's face fell, but she refused to give up. I have my own path, Pian Ran said, her gaze drifting toward the window. Her voice softened, distant. But I will leave here, sooner or later. Chapter 19, Leaving the Lu Manor. You're leaving? Have you forgotten? You promised to stay by my side for 10 days. Lu Yuan's voice cut in at just the right moment as she stepped out from the inner room, eyes fixed on Pian Ran. Pian Ran turned to her, then looked back at Sun Meng. You see, Miss Sun? Even if I wanted to leave, it's not entirely up to me. Sun Meng glanced from Pian Ran to Lu Yuan, then looked at the latter with a trace of reproach. Jia, why are you trying to keep Pian Ranjia in the Lu Manor? Lu Yuan was momentarily startled but then responded gently, Menger, it's not that I'm forcing her. She signed a written agreement to help investigate the theft and, in exchange, agreed to stay with me for 10 days. As she spoke, she took out the agreement from her sleeve and handed it to Sun Meng. Meng gave it a cursory glance, then burst into laughter. Jia, are you seriously trying to pass this off as fair? Menger, Lu Yuan looked at her, puzzled. That Qi and golden pill is such a precious treasure, and yet you gave her only 50 taels? On top of that, you expect her to serve you for 10 more days? Isn't that a little shameless? Lu Yuan flushed red. She knew the deal had been skewed too far in her favor, but Pian Ran had named the terms herself. What was she supposed to do? Offer more? Menger, it's not as you think. Enough. Jia, how about this? Just let Pian Ranjia go. Think of it as doing me a favor. Now Lu Yuan was genuinely torn. She didn't want to let Pian Ran go just yet, but Meng's request left her with no room to outright refuse. This was a dilemma. Jia, Meng added with a blink of her big eyes, Big Brother always tells me not to bully others with power or wealth. If he knew you were making things hard for a maid, he'd definitely be displeased. Do you want that? Lu Yuan's expression wavered. That had hit a nerve. Menger, I never meant to make things difficult for her, but Pian Ranjia doesn't want to stay here. Meng argued, turning to Pian Ran. Right? Pian Ranjia? I do have other matters to attend to, Pian Ran replied flatly. See? Jia, just be generous, will you? You have so many maids, losing one won't matter. Meng pouted playfully. Lu Yuan remained silent for a long moment. At last, she gritted her teeth and said, fine. Since it's you asking, I'll agree this time. She was interested in Pian Ran, but offending the governor's household over this wasn't worth it. Pian Ran blinked once and said nothing. That was good. Though she wasn't exactly fond of Sun Meng, she had to admit the girl had done her a favor by helping her leave the Lu Manor on her own terms. For that, Pian Ran was quietly grateful. Pian Ranjia, when do you plan to leave? Sun Meng asked excitedly, a tone that felt particularly jarring to Lu Yuan's ears. Right now, Pian Ran replied calmly. Great, then we can go together. Meng waved cheerfully at Lu Yuan. Jia, I'm leaving now. I'll visit again sometime. Menger, must you go so soon? Won't you stay a little longer? Lu Yuan tried to hold her back. Nope, I want to leave with Pian Ranjia. Meng's round eyes sparkled as she looked at Pian Ran, clearly having taken a liking to her. All right then, don't go running wild, and be sure to return home early, Lu Yuan sighed, unable to resist giving a few parting instructions. I know, I'm not a little kid anymore. Meng pouted. Third miss, I take my leave. Pian Ran bowed slightly to Liu Yuan, then walked away, with the ever-persistent Miss Sun trailing closely behind. Only after stepping outside the manor gate did Pianren glance back. This grand estate had never felt like a place she belonged. The sooner she left, the sooner she could return to her own quiet life. Of course, that depended on whether Miss Sun would take the hint and leave, but judging by her personality, she was clearly the type who wouldn't take a hint. Pianranjia, where are we going now? It's not we, it's you. You should be heading home. Pianran offered a kind reminder. Why do you keep trying to send me home? Mengmeng pouted, looking aggrieved. There's only my brother at home. It's boring. I don't want to go back. A young lady wandering the streets all day, how can that be proper? The words slipped out before Pianran could stop herself. Odd. Had someone said the same to her once? At least at home, someone's waiting for you. But here, who would be waiting for you? She gave Mengmeng a glance. Such a spoiled girl, ungrateful for her blessings. And yet, when Pianran thought of herself, wanting to return home, yet with no home left to return to, her heart tightened. Well, I'm not going home. I'm going wherever you go. Such willfulness couldn't be helped. Pianran had no intention of explaining to her that, if she wanted to shake her off, it would be the easiest thing in the world, just like she could easily shake off the Lu Manor guards who had tried to trail her in secret. Suit yourself. Thinking she had finally won her over, Sun Mengmeng happily followed beside her, eyes darting about with curiosity and excitement. In no time at all, the entire street was staring at them. Mengmeng was simply too flashy. She threw out silver like it was paper, buying things left and right without a second thought. Some of the money she spent could have bought the entire vendor's stall. Naturally, such careless displays quickly attracted the wrong kind of attention. In a nearby alley, a few shady figures had already been keeping a close watch on her. Pianran saw them, but said nothing. She'd never been one to meddle in others' affairs. Today was no different. Though Mengmeng had helped her earlier, it had been entirely of her own volition. Pianran owed her nothing. Taking a sharp turn, she slipped into a narrow alley. Looking back, she could still glimpse Mengmeng excitedly bargaining at one of the stalls, utterly unaware. But even before she entered the alley, she had already noticed those thugs starting to move. She lowered her gaze and walked slowly toward the other end of the alley. But just as she neared the exit, a shadow blocked her path. She raised her head slowly, frowning instinctively. Hey there, little miss. Where you off to? Two men stood in her way, leering. They were both lanky, and Pianran instantly recognized them, two of the men who'd been eyeing Mengmeng earlier. But why block her? She wasn't some rich heiress like Mengmeng. Step aside. I don't have any money, she said coldly. The two were clearly caught off guard by her calm response. They exchanged glances, and one of them chuckled, eyes gleaming. Ah, don't be like that, pretty girl. Aren't you lonely all by yourself? Why not come hang out with us? Don't worry, we won't hurt you. As they spoke, the two began closing in, their hands reaching out as if to grab her. Pianran stepped back, glaring at the approaching hands with disgust. Her voice dropped into a frigid tone. Come any closer, and you'll regret it. Oh yeah? One of the men sneered. What are you gonna do, huh? Little miss, I suggest you just be a good. Before he could finish, his world spun. A sharp pain bloomed at his neck and shoulder as a fierce chop sent him crumpling to the ground. His companion barely had time to blink before a solid punch slammed into his jaw. He let out a shriek, falling to the ground, clutching his face, dazed. What the hell? How is this girl so strong? He tried to scramble to his feet, but a cold gleam flashed across his vision, a dagger now pressed against his throat. And Pianran's voice, cold as death itself, chilled him to the bone. Move again, and you die. Chapter 20. The Blundering Bandits. Please, miss. Have mercy. The thug was frozen in fear, his face as pale as death. Who sent you? Pianran asked coldly. The man hesitated for a moment, then forced a fawning smile. I'm just a street punk, miss. I saw that young lady flashing silver like rain, and greed got the better of me. I just wanted to grab a little spending money. Oh, Pianran's gaze grew icier. So if you were only after money, why did you block my path? Well, I figured you were with Miss Sun, so you had to be another rich girl. I thought, might as well. His voice grew weaker under Pianran's frosty glare, trailing off until he dared say no more. A street punk, huh? Since when does a nobody like you dare lay a finger on the governor's daughter? What is it? Have you got a death wish, or did you eat something stupid for breakfast? The thug's face changed dramatically. He let out a dry, nervous laugh. I swear I didn't know she was the governor's daughter. If I had, I wouldn't have touched her even if someone gave me the guts to try. Really? Pianran's voice was calm, but her eyes suddenly turned sharp as blades. You expect me to believe a lie that dumb? You didn't know she was the daughter of the governor, yet you called her Miss Sun so fluently? You think people around you are deaf? How many wealthy families named Sun do you think there are in Qianma City? A punk who can't even recognize his targets is either too stupid to live, or he's got a death wish. I might as well send you on your way. A mercy, really. The thug's knees were shaking by now, cold sweat pouring down his face. The blade at his neck felt ice cold and terrifyingly sharp. Was this girl serious? He didn't want to die. Not yet, miss. No, Lady Hero. Please, spare me. I've got an old mother, a young child. Shut up, Pianran snapped. Now answer me. Who sent you? It really was just greed, I swear, grabbing him by the collar. Pianran slammed him against the wall and stared him down with burning eyes. I'll ask one more time. Who sent you? You don't have to answer, of course. I don't mind cutting your throat open. After all, there's still another guy lying right here. She lowered her eyes slightly to glance at the still unconscious thug on the ground, then added calmly, once he wakes up and sees a corpse lying in a pool of blood, he might suddenly become very cooperative. What do you think? The thug's face turned ghostly white. Pianran knew then, she had struck the right nerve. No, please. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything. His will finally collapsed like a flood swamp dam. It was Boss Yu, from Qingshui Wharf. Qingshui Wharf was a small dock on the banks of the Qingshui River, just outside Qianma City. It was managed by a man named Yushin. In recent years, the entire waterway trade trade had been gradually monopolized by Sun Wuhan. Small docks were struggling to survive, some had already changed industries or were swallowed up by Sun's commercial empire. Yushin's wharf was one of the few still hanging on, though barely. Faced with mounting losses, Yu had considered joining Qianma Trading Co., Sun Wuhan's conglomerate, as the only viable path forward. But the wharf had been in the Yu family for generations. Handing it over was hard to accept. And yet, he had dozens of workers to feed, and his business couldn't support them anymore. The stress was eating him alive. A few days ago, one of the dockhands had given him a bold idea: kidnap Sun Mengmeng and use her as leverage to negotiate with Sun Wuhan. After long deliberation and desperation, Yushin finally gave in. He hired a few thugs from the city to wait for the right moment and snatch her. But he hadn't accounted for Pian Ran. Her unexpected intervention had thoroughly derailed the plan. So, let me get this straight, Pian Ran said flatly. You were sent by Yushin of Qingshui Wharf to kidnap Sun Mengmeng in order to strike a deal with Sun Wuhan? She had already guessed most of it the moment these men blocked her. If they were just after money, there'd be no reason to go after her, too. Clearly, they were afraid of alerting Sun Wuhan and losing the element of surprise. The thug nodded. Yes, that's right. Lady Hero, I've told you everything. Please, let me go. I was just doing a job, nothing personal. Where is Sun Mengmeng now? Pian Ran ignored his pleas. In the underground warehouse at Qingshui Wharf, but the place is heavily guarded. Even with your skills, it'd be tough to rescue her alone. But don't worry, I doubt Boss Yu will harm her. He's not foolish enough to provoke Sun Wuhan. Pian Ran sheathed her dagger without a word. You can go. The thug wiped his neck, visibly relieved. But then, with a smile, he crept closer. Lady Hero, would you like me to lead the way? They call me Road Tiger in Qianma. I can handle all kinds of business. Reasonable prices, honest service, just a little silver, and you want to sleep beside him? Pian Ran's icy glare pierced him like arrows. Road Tiger glanced at the still unconscious man on the ground. His grin froze. He quickly waved his hands. No, I'll be going now. Wait. Road Tiger had just taken a step when Pian Ran called out again. Yes, Lady Hero? Any other instructions? Take him with you. She frowned at the figure still lying on the ground. Him? Oh, that's Jaguar. Road Tiger pointed to the man. He's a fellow punk, same as me. Pian Ran blinked. Road Tiger and Jaguar? She had to fight the urge to ask if there was a third guy named Mercedes. Road Tiger bent down to drag Jaguar by the legs. When that failed, he switched to the arms, still no luck. Finally, he slapped Jaguar twice across the face. Loudly. Hey, get up. You want to die here? Jaguar groaned, blinking in a daze, as if he hadn't yet figured out where he was. Dinner time? He mumbled in a dopey voice that didn't suit his rough appearance at all. Dinner your head. Let's go. It's over. Road Tiger hauled him to his feet, flashed Pian Ran a final sheepish smile, and staggered off, dragging Jaguar with him. Pian Ran watched them leave. Oddly, she found them not so despicable. Maybe even a little amusing. Just moments ago they had tried to kidnap Sun Mengmeng, yet now she felt oddly sympathetic. Was she really so cold-hearted? Her ex-boyfriend used to ask her in frustration, Pian, is your heart made of stone? He had always seen her as emotionally detached, indifferent to the world. But she was human too. It wasn't that she felt nothing, she simply didn't know how to show it. And besides, some things couldn't be changed no matter how you felt. If expressing emotion wouldn't change the outcome, then what was the point? To her, it was all just a waste of time. But now, something in her stirred, an impulse she couldn't explain. She wanted to go. She wanted to see for herself, to do something she once thought was just a waste of life. But why? She had no answer.